The sun bled orange across the manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Estates, the kind of neighborhood where kids still rode bikes without helmets and porch flags snapped in the evening breeze. Amara Pierce walked the same route she'd walked every Tuesday and Thursday since fourth grade, violin case swinging lightly in her left hand, purple hoodie zipped against the first real chill of fall, earbuds feeding her the last movement of Mendelssohn. She was humming along, counting steps in 4/4 time, when the unmarked gray Dodge Charger cut across 2 lanes and killed its headlights 20 feet in front of her. Doors flew open before the car even rocked to a stop. 2 officers spilled out, both white, both already yelling. The first one, badge glinting 482, nameplate reading T. Kegel, moved like he'd been wound too tight all shift. His hand hovered over his holster the way some men keep fingers on wedding rings when they're nervous. Hands where I can see them. Now. The words detonated across the quiet street, scattering sparrows from the maples. Amara froze. The violin case slipped from her fingers and hit the sidewalk with a hollow thud that sounded, to her, like a body hitting the ground. She raised both arms slowly, palms open, the way her mother had taught her since she was 6. Don't run. Don't reach. Speak soft, eyes down. The rules felt suddenly childish against the muzzle of a duty Glock pointed at her chest. Officer Kegel was on her in 4 strides. Gravel crunched under his boots like breaking bones. He seized her left wrist, twisted it behind her back so hard the joint sang, then slammed her forward. The hood of the Charger was still warm from the engine. Her cheek met metal with a dull, wet smack. Air exploded from her lungs. The world tilted, sky, streetlight, her own violin case lying sideways like a coffin. "Stop resisting," he bellowed, though she hadn't moved an inch. Cold steel snapped around her right wrist, then her left. The cuffs were adult-sized. They swallowed half her forearms and pinched skin already blooming purple. Somewhere behind the wall of uniforms, a neighbor's porch light flicked on, but no one stepped outside. Phones rose like periscopes. Red and blue strobes painted every face guilty. Across the street, half hidden behind tinted glass, Special Agent in Charge Lena Pierce felt the exact moment her heart stopped. She had parked 2 blocks over, out of habit, because even off-duty she never left the protectee's residence without eyes on the route. One second she was checking messages from the White House military office, the next she was watching her only child being folded over a car hood by a man who outweighed her by 130 pounds. Her hand went to the Sig Sauer under her blazer, then froze. Protocol. Cover. The president was wheels up in 48 hours. Any breach now and the entire detail could be pulled. She whispered into her sleeve anyway, voice flat and lethal, "All units, stand down." "That is my daughter." Static answered. The officer couldn't hear her. No one could. Amara's breath fogged the paint in short, panicked bursts. She tasted blood where her lip had split. "I live here," she tried, voice small against the roar of authority. "I was just walking home." Kegel leaned in, weight pinning her spine. "We got a call about a suspicious juvenile matching your description trying car doors." There had been no such call. Not yet. The second officer, younger, nameplate R. Delgado, circled like a nervous dog. His body cam glowed red, recording every second, but his eyes kept flicking to the growing cluster of phones across the street. "Sarge, she's just a kid," he muttered, barely audible over the idling engine. Kegel didn't answer. He was already patting her down with rough, practiced sweeps, shoulders, ribs, waist, the small of her back, fingers lingering a half-second too long at the drawstring of her hoodie. Amara squeezed her eyes shut. She tried to think of the Mendelssohn again, the soaring violin line, but all she heard was the metallic click of the cuffs ratcheting tighter and the wet thud of her own pulse in her ears. "Got anything in your pockets I should know about?" Kegel's breath was hot against her ear, coffee and wintergreen skull. "Needles? Pipes?" "No, sir," she whispered. The word "sir" came out automatic, drilled into her by a mother who wore the same flag on her shoulder every day. From her SUV, Lena watched her daughter's knees buckle slightly as Kegel yanked her upright by the chain between the cuffs. Amara's toes scraped the asphalt, searching for balance. Lena's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. She felt the exact weight of the credential folder in her breast pocket, gold badge, presidential seal, felt how useless it was right now. One flash of it and the operation collapsed, careers ended, lives quietly rearranged. She had spent 15 years learning to put the mission above everything, even breath. Tonight the lesson tasted like rust. A third cruiser slid in behind the Charger, light bars strobing manic. Sergeant Kowalski stepped out, older, heavier, the kind of man whose belt seemed to groan under the accumulated authority of 2 decades. He took one look at the scene, tiny girl cuffed and bleeding, officer twice her size looming, and something flickered across his face. Not regret. Calculation. "Kegel, what do we got?" he asked, voice low, already bored. "Suspicious person, possible Binny in progress." She matches the description from the 911 call. Kegel's tone carried the brittle confidence of someone reciting lines he hadn't written yet. Kowalski's eyes slid to Amara, then to the violin case lying cracked open on the sidewalk, sheet music fluttering like wounded birds. For a moment the street was nothing but the whine of cicadas and the soft mechanical heartbeat of the body cams. Then Kowalski nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Load her up." Delgado hesitated. "Sarge, she says she lives." "I said load her up." Amara felt herself lifted, half carried, half dragged toward the back of Kowalski's cruiser. The door yawned open like a mouth. She caught one last lungful of outside air, cut grass, distant barbecue smoke, before the cage door slammed and the smell changed to vinyl, vomit, and lemon disinfectant that never quite worked. Inside the SUV, Lena was already moving. She slipped the earpiece deeper, thumbed the secure channel. "Control, this is Pierce. I need immediate eyes on Oak Ridge PD intake, juvenile side. Do not ask why." Her voice never shook. It didn't have permission to. The cruiser pulled away. Amara's face appeared for one heartbeat in the rear window, eyes wide, mouth forming a word Lena couldn't hear through the glass. Then the taillights disappeared around the corner, taking the last of the daylight with them. The ride lasted 9 minutes and felt like a lifetime in a box. Amara sat sideways because the cuffs forced her shoulders back at a cruel angle, the chain digging into her spine every time the cruiser hit a pothole. The partition glass was scratched and fogged with old breath. Through it she could see the backs of Kowalski's and Kegel's heads, silhouettes lit red, blue, like something out of a horror film her friends weren't allowed to watch. No one spoke. The radio crackled with codes she didn't understand, addresses that weren't hers, until finally the car slowed and turned beneath a Sallyport gate that clanged shut behind them like a bear trap. Doors opened to a loading dock that smelled of diesel and wet concrete. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead, harsh enough to make the blood on her lip look black. Kegel hauled her out by the elbow. Her legs had gone half numb. The first step sent pins and needles shooting through her feet, and she stumbled. He didn't slow down. Inside, the air was colder, refrigerated almost, the way grocery stores keep the meat case. Footsteps echoed off cinderblock walls, painted the color of nicotine. A female detention officer, name tag Harris, face like a tired librarian, glanced up from a clipboard, took in the purple hoodie, the split lip, the cuffs swallowing a child's wrists, and looked away again. Paperwork first. Humanity later. They marched her past a row of holding cells where older kids stared out with flat, practiced eyes. One boy pressed his forehead to the plexiglass and mouthed something she couldn't catch. Amara kept her gaze on the scuffed linoleum, counting tiles the way her mother taught her to count breaths when panic climbed her throat. Photographs first. They uncuffed one wrist only long enough to twist her body against a height chart, 4 feet 9 inches in unicorn socks. Flash. Front. Flash. Right side. Flash. Each burst of light felt like a slap. When they recuffed her hands in front, the metal had warmed from her skin and now felt almost alive, biting deeper. Fingerprints next. The lift scan machine glowed sickly blue. Officer Harris rolled Amara's small fingers across the glass plate harder than necessary, leaving smudges of blood where the cuff edges had open skin. The printer spat out a card that listed her as juvenile female, black, 12YO, suspected auto burglary/resisting. Amara stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Then the search room. A female officer, different one, younger, voice flat as cafeteria gravy, ordered her to remove the hoodie. Amara hesitated. The woman snapped, "Now or I cut it off." The purple fabric dropped to the floor like shed skin. Goose flesh raced across her arms. They made her turn, lift her feet, open her mouth, run fingers through her braids while the overhead camera stared down like a dead white eye. When they handed her the orange scrubs, the shirt hung to her knees and the elastic waist pants required 3 rolls at the cuffs. The canvas slippers were gray with other people's footprints. She clutched the bundle to her chest and felt, for the first time, something colder than fear, shame that had nothing to do with anything she'd done. They walked her to Juvenile Pod C, past a payphone bolted high on the wall, too high for her to reach even if they'd let her use it. The heavy door rolled open on tracks that screamed like something wounded. Inside, the lights never went off. Just dimmed to a sickly amber that made everyone look half dead. They put her in cell 4 alone. The door sealed with a sound like a vault. Amara stood in the middle of the 8x10 box, arms wrapped around herself, and listened to the building breathe around her, distant shouting, a toilet flushing, someone crying in short, hiccuping bursts that echoed wrong off the concrete. She lowered herself to the edge of the metal bunk. The thin mattress smelled of bleach and old urine. Blood from her lip dripped onto the orange fabric and spread like a tiny rose. Outside in the parking lot, Lena Pierce arrived with credentials already drawn, moving like a storm front in civilian clothes. Security cameras caught her for only 3 frames before she disappeared into a side door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Inside cell 4, Amara pressed her forehead to the cold wall and whispered the only thing that still felt true. "Mommy's coming." Chapter 1 ends on the soft, brutal cliff of a mother racing through corridors she was never meant to enter, and a daughter learning exactly how small the world can make you when it decides you don't belong in it. The juvenile pod never truly went dark. The lights dimmed to a bruised amber that pooled in the corners and left long shadows crawling across the floor like spilled ink. Amara sat on the edge of the bunk, knees drawn to her chest, orange pants rolled so many times the cuffs looked like donuts around her ankles. Every few minutes the intercom crackled with a voice that sounded miles away, calling names she didn't know, followed by the metallic shriek of doors rolling open and closed somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps approached, 2 sets, one heavy, one lighter. Keys jangled like wind chimes made of bone. The observation slot in her door snapped open, revealing a slice of face lit from beneath. Officer Harris again, eyes flat and tired. "Pierce. Interview." Amara's stomach dropped through the floor. She unfolded herself slowly, legs asleep and prickling. Harris didn't enter. She simply waited while another officer, male, young, acne scars glowing under the sick light, opened the door and motioned her out. The cuffs came back on, looser this time, but the chain between her wrists was short enough that her shoulders still ached. They walked her past the other cells. Faces pressed to the small windows. A boy with a black eye, a girl with cornrows picking at a scab, another kid asleep standing up, forehead against the glass. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than shouting. The interview room was smaller than her closet at home. Gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 plastic chairs the color of dried blood. A camera in the corner blinked red like it had a heartbeat. They sat her down, attached the chain between her cuffs to a ring in the tabletop. The metal was cold enough to burn. Detective Sergeant M. Kowalski entered alone. Same man from the street, now in plain clothes. Khakis, polo stretched tight across a belly earned from too many stakeouts and not enough sleep. He carried a manila folder thick with blank pages and a styrofoam cup of coffee that steamed like anger. He didn't sit right away. Just stood there, looking down at her the way people look at roadkill they're trying to decide whether to move. "Amara Pierce," he read from the top sheet, drawing the name out like he was tasting something spoiled. 12 years old. Lives at 1847 Maple Crest Lane. That sound about right? She nodded. The motion made the cut on her lip reopen. She tasted copper. Kowalski finally sat. The chair groaned. He opened the folder, flipped through pages she couldn't see, then looked up with a small, tired smile that never reached his eyes. "Want to tell me what you were doing trying car doors on the 1800 block?" I wasn't. He raised a hand, gentle, almost kind. Let's not start with lies, sweetheart. We've got witnesses. Amara's throat closed. There were no witnesses. But no one had seen her touch a single car. She knew it the way she knew the sun would rise. Kowalski leaned forward, elbows on the table. The overhead light carved deep trenches under his eyes. Here's how this goes, he said, voice soft now, almost fatherly. You tell me the truth, we call your parents, you go home tonight with a warning. You keep lying, we book you for felony auto burglary and resisting. That's adult court in this state once we file the papers. You understand what adult court means for a little girl like you. The room tilted. Amara felt the walls breathing closer. She tried to find air and couldn't. I want my mom, she whispered. Kowalski's smile thinned. Yeah. Everyone wants their mom. The detective slid a legal pad across the table, pen on top like a loaded gun. Write it down, he said. Everything you touched, every car you tried. Names of your friends who were with you. Make it easy on yourself. Amara stared at the blank yellow page. The cuffs clinked when she tried to pick up the pen. The chain was too short. Kowalski sighed, reached over, and unhooked her right wrist from the table ring. The sudden slack felt like mercy until she realized he was still watching every twitch of her fingers. She wrote her name at the top in careful cursive, the same handwriting her violin teacher praised. Then she stopped. The pen trembled above the paper. Kowalski waited 30 silent seconds, then stood so fast the chair rolled back and crashed against the wall. You think this is a game? His voice cracked like a slap. We've got you on body cam fighting Officer Cagle. You've got his blood on your hoodie. That's felony assault on a peace officer right there. Amara looked down. There was a small rust-colored smear near the hem, Cagle's blood from when her elbow had caught his nose during the takedown. She hadn't even felt it happen. I didn't mean, she started. Intent doesn't matter. He leaned in until she smelled the sour coffee on his breath. Only what the tape shows. And the tape shows a violent suspect who refused lawful commands. He let that settle, then softened again, the good cop switch flipping so fast it made her dizzy. Help me help you, Amar. Give me something I can work with. Tears blurred the page. She blinked hard. She would not cry in front of this man. Somewhere in the building a door slammed, and someone screamed a single, broken word that echoed down the hallway like a warning. Kowalski glanced at his watch. Clock's ticking. Judge leaves at 11. After that, you stay the weekend. He stepped out, leaving the door open 6 inches, just enough for the hallway light to cut across the floor like a blade. Through the gap she heard muffled voices. Kowalski, Cagle, someone else with a deeper drawl. Words floated in. Mom's some kind of fed, but no one's claiming her yet. Keep her separated. No phone call till we get the statement. Body cam's already in evidence. We're good. The door closed again. The room shrank. Amara rested her forehead on the cold tabletop. The metal smelled of bleach and old sweat. She tried to picture her mother's face, the calm one she wore when the president walked past, the one that never flinched. But all she could see was the cruiser's rear window sliding away, taking the last piece of outside with it. Minutes bled together. The wall clock's second hand jerked forward in wounded ticks. At 9:58 the door opened again, and a different officer stepped in, tall, black, close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. His nameplate read L.T. Carter. Something in his eyes looked almost human. You okay, baby? He asked, voice so low she almost missed it. Amara lifted her head. Her lip had crusted over. When she opened her mouth it split again. I didn't do anything, she said. It came out smaller than breath. Carter glanced at the camera, then at the open folder Kowalski had left behind. He closed it gently. I know, he said. Hold tight. He left as quietly as he'd come. The door stayed cracked this time, and through it drifted the smell of cafeteria food, burnt tater tots and despair. The temperature in the interview room dropped another degree when the air handler kicked on, pushing the smell of industrial cleaner across the table like a cold hand. Amara's bare arms prickled under the oversized orange shirt. She had stopped trying to write anything. The pen lay on its side, a tiny white flag of surrender. At 10:27 the door opened again and Kowalski returned with a second detective, shorter, wiry, tie loosened like he'd been pulling at it all night. They didn't sit. They stood over her, two silhouettes blocking the light. "Last chance," Kowalski said. "Sign the statement. Admit you were trying handles. Juvenile record gets sealed at 18. No one ever knows." The wiry one placed a single sheet in front of her. 3 paragraphs, neatly typed. It said she had been acting in concert with persons unknown, that she had resisted lawful detention, that she had struck Officer Cagle in the face with a closed fist. Her name was already typed at the bottom, waiting for a 12-year-old's shaky signature. Amara stared at the lie until the letters swam. She thought of her mother's voice on the first day of 2nd grade. "Never sign anything you didn't write, baby. Not ever." She pushed the paper away with 2 fingers, the chain between the cuffs singing softly. Kowalski's jaw flexed. "Have it your way." They unhooked her from the table and marched her back down the corridor. The other kids were quieter now, drugged by exhaustion and fluorescent burn. Somewhere a girl was humming a church song under her breath, off-key and stubborn. Back in cell for they left the cuffs off. The door rolled shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Amara stood in the middle of the floor, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. Purple bruises ringed them like ugly bracelets. She counted heartbeats until the overhead speaker crackled. "Pierce, roll up. You're staying." The lights dimmed another shade, not to darkness but to the color of old bruises. She curled on the bunk, knees to chest, and tried to make herself smaller than the system already believed she was. Outside the facility, in a corridor most officers never saw, Lena Pierce moved like smoke. She had shed the blazer, traded it for a borrowed windbreaker with no markings. Her Secret Service credential was clipped inside her waistband now, hidden but ready. She had already spoken to the watch commander, the shift lieutenant, and the county prosecutor's on-call assistant, quiet words, steel underneath. Each conversation had ended the same way, the person on the other end suddenly remembering urgent paperwork elsewhere. At 11:12 p.m. she stood outside the juvenile control booth, watching the monitor that showed cell 4. The grainy feed painted her daughter in shades of amber and despair. Amara's mouth was moving. Lena couldn't hear, but she knew the shape of the word anyway. "Mommy." Lena's hand rested on the butt of her cig, not drawing, just reminding herself it was there. She turned to Lieutenant Carter, the same man who had checked on Amara earlier, and spoke so softly the microphones wouldn't catch it. "Open the door." Carter hesitated half a second, then keyed his radio. Releasing Pierce, Amara to lobby for parental pickup. Paperwork to follow. A long pause. Then the speaker crackled back, "Copy. Door unlocking now." The magnetic lock on cell 4 thunked open like a heartbeat restarting. Amara sat up slowly, afraid to believe the sound. Footsteps, lighter, quicker, approached. The door rolled wide and there, framed in the sick light, stood her mother. No badge visible. No gun drawn. Just eyes that had seen wars and still found room to break. Amara flew across the cell and collided with Lena's chest so hard the wind left both of them. Lena's arms closed around her daughter like armor, fingers threading through braids that smelled of jail soap and fear. "It's over," Lena whispered against her hair. "I've got you." Behind them, Carter looked away, giving them the only privacy the building allowed. But as Lena guided Amara down the corridor toward the exit, past the staring officers and the silent kids who now pressed their faces to the glass in something like hope, Kowalski stepped out of a side office. He watched mother and daughter walk past, eyes narrowing at the absence of paperwork, the missing signatures, the way every door seemed to open before Lena even reached for it. He pulled out his phone and thumbed a text to a number saved only as Sarge. They let her go. No statement. "Something's off." The reply came back in under 10 seconds. "Then we fix the cameras. And the report writes itself."